I start broadcasting now. 3, 2, 1.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the ETF webinar about web-based platforms for vocational teachers. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining this meeting wherever you are. I believe that we've got over 50 participants at the minute from many different countries. I can't work out exactly how many countries at the minute, but I'm really pleased that you've come together to find out what's going on and to share your ideas. And I'm looking forward to a really interesting an hour and a half of discussion with you. Thank you. I'm going to pass over to my colleague, the unit manager, Xavier Di Matteo, who's going to just start us off now. Xavier.
Okay, thank you. Welcome everybody to this webinar on virtual networking for vocational teachers. I just will be very brief because you have the most important things to say. Just 3 ideas. The first one is that the ETF is now very much engaged in a process of digitalization, and this means that we are trying to maximize the opportunities brought by digital technologies in order to improve our method of work and our modus operandi. And this refers, of course, to communicating between the different people working in a same subject, networking, and of course organizing events and workshops through these means like today. The topic we think is particularly relevant for the continuous development of teachers and trainers, because the importance of CBT, of continuous training done through digital online learning means, and therefore this is something that I think all teachers who want to follow continuous training have to consider. Second thing, because digital skills are particularly important for the learners, and therefore the best way of promoting these skills is by using digital skills in the learning process, and also because the importance that the digital way of working has in the future work, and that if something is doing is preparing people to work. So I think these virtual networks are an important means in the future for many different types of learning, but particularly for teachers. So having said that, I think that's the main introduction I wanted to say. I will pass the word to Julian, who will make a presentation of the webinar. Thank you.
Xavier, thank you very much indeed for starting us off like that. I'd like, before I start, to set out my ideas about web-based networks, just to sort of find out a little bit what you want to learn from participation in this webinar. So I'm going to ask my colleague to launch a poll now, just so we've got an idea about why you're here and what you want to learn. I'd be really grateful if you just select an option very quickly, and then we'll instantly close the poll to see what people want to learn from this session. So please check the box so that we can see why you've come to this session, who you are, and what you want to get from it. It's looking good. It's looking good. We're getting lots of participation there. I think we just need a few more people. I think 66% of people have voted, so we'll just take it up to a few more, and then we'll close the poll, and we can feed back to you what people want from this session. Okay, so if we close the poll now, I can report to you that that 15% of you are already helping to run web-based networks. 13% want to learn how to do it. 33%, a third of you, have an involvement in professional development, and 62% have got a general interest in vocational education. So thank you very much for that. That's a useful starting point for us, and I hope there's something in this webinar for all of you. You can see from my opening slide that we have a couple of Twitter opportunities for you. So if you'd like to tweet during the webinar, you can use our hashtag ETFCPD, or you can tweet through ETF so that we can have some further responses from you. Further, if you'd like to ask questions during the course of the webinar, I point out to you on the right-hand side of your screen, there's an option called Questions Chat. And you can write in any question you've got to any speaker in there, and we'll gather together the questions, and then when we have a pause, we will try and answer questions as well as we can. So please, if you've got a question, please, whenever you want, just fire that question in English, please, and then we'll attempt to answer it when we get a chance. I mean, either to me or to one of the other speakers. So I just wanted to say a couple of words about why we think web-based networks are very important for vocational teachers. I think the first point to say is that in many countries there are not very good teaching and learning materials, and that textbooks are also quite limited. And one of the really exciting things about web-based networks is the way they can be used for sharing open educational resources. And what I mean by that is that teachers or publishers can create resources which then can be edited, which can be changed. So this is a way of making sure that not only are good quality resources circulated, but that they can be adapted and tailored to particular languages, to particular schools, to particular teachers and students, which I think makes networking very, very exciting. And it is a way in which collectively I think we can improve the quality of teaching and learning resources in vocational education. And connected to that is the way in which web-based networking makes it so much easier for teachers to collaborate. I think that very often the practice in the past has been that vocational teachers have worked by themselves. They have had the responsibility for preparing their lessons, for working out how to teach things best. But that's quite hard work, and it also means that practice doesn't change very much. So we're very keen to encourage collaboration, so that teachers with a certain interest or with a certain branch or specialism can collaborate with other teachers when they need to, either before a lesson or when they've got a problem or when they're preparing a program. And one of the great things about networks is it makes it easy for you to find another teacher who's working with the same kind of branch, the same curriculum, and collaborate with that teacher. Because you can search through a network to find another teacher who's got similar problems and similar objectives. The third idea I want to mention to you is the idea of putting the professional back into professional development. Because so much of professional development for vocational teachers is training events which are given by trainers to teachers. And there are limited opportunities for teachers to shape those events. They can't say, well, this is what I need to be able to do. These are the experiences, these are the practice I need. But the point about a network is that teachers can themselves find out and decide what they need to learn, where they want to develop. And they can use the network to work with other teachers or possibly with trainers to develop their own expertise at the level they've got to. And that's what I mean about making professional development more professional. It means that the teachers themselves have got more control to shape that professional development, and I believe, therefore, to make that professional development much more valuable and useful for them. That takes me on to the next idea, which is that I think generally we believe that virtual platforms, web-based platforms, should not be used by themselves, but they should be used together with live events. So, for example, you might bring teachers together for training and then follow up that training by building a platform where teachers can share their experiences of how they try to use those experiences. Or you might build a platform which prepares teachers so that subsequently they can participate in a real live training event. So I think the blending of face-to-face and online networking is likely to be the most effective way of using these in the future. Digital video, I think, is a very exciting thing for networking. It means that we can share not only ideas, but we can also share practice and we can share skills. And I think that's very important to the improvement of teaching. And the last idea I want to mention there is what I call the empowering of local heroes. Because too much of development for teachers, I think, relies upon experts, people who are quite senior, people who have built up a long track record, but perhaps people who are not so ambitious anymore about changing things. And one of the great things about networks is it creates an opportunity for people who want to experiment, who want to try out new ideas, to share what they're doing with lots of other colleagues. And the network creates that chance for them. And I think that can bring new energy and new resource into professional development and into teaching. This diagram here is just a way of thinking about what networks can be and what they can do. So in the left-hand corner, I'm talking about face-to-face networks. That's teachers meeting together and working face-to-face. In the right-hand corner, we're talking about virtual or web-based networking. The circle in the middle represents blending of the two, where teachers are working together both web-based ways and also face-to-face. And then on the other axis of the diagram, there's the different functionalities, the different things that people can do in networking. So, for example, sharing of open educational resources, news, using e-learning tools, forums, blogs, collaborative knowledge, and finding partners. So the idea of this diagram is to say, well, look, all of these things can be done face-to-face, or they can be done using the web, or they can be done in a combined way. And clearly, if we're willing to experiment with different ways of doing these things, then perhaps we can have a bigger range and we can engage more people. So very briefly, just some ideas about why web-based networks are particularly relevant to Southeastern Europe and Turkey. I think there's a particular issue for teachers who are spread out geographically. I think there's a big cost for organizing face-to-face training, and that means there's not enough training. I think sometimes formal training events are irrelevant to vocational teachers. We know that most formal training events in Southeast Europe and Turkey don't focus on the specialist professional needs of teachers. They tend to only have a general pedagogic function. We know that quite often there's a lack of textbooks and materials in the national languages. We know that sometimes there's a failure to connect what teachers learn in professional development sessions with what they subsequently do in the classroom. And we think that networks are quite good for helping teachers not only to get new ideas, but subsequently to use them in teaching and learning in the classroom. We know also that tests like PISA are raising expectations upon teachers. They're making governments and parents say, well, maybe the teaching is not good enough, the quality should be improved. And we think that networks are one way in which teachers together can respond to those rising expectations. And we know also that curriculum is changing, learning outcomes approaches are being introduced, and we know that this will imply changes in the way subjects are taught, and that teachers need to come together to work out how to do that. I'm going to pause there. That's all I want to say to start with. I'd like to just find out what you think about that by launching a second poll. So my colleague now will launch a new poll, poll 2, and we'll see what you've made of that.
Julian, in the meantime, we received already some questions so that we have to consider, and at a certain moment we should answer. We might decide to have at the end or during the session.
Okay. I'm just having a look. I see this. I'd just like to report to you we've got some interesting questions coming in. There's a range of questions. I'm asked if you'll be able to receive the presentations, and yes, you will be able to receive the presentations. I will give you an address on our platform where you'll be able to download the presentations. Also, I can report to you that the recording will be available once we finish the webinar. The recording of the webinar will be available to you, so that if you want, you can share it with colleagues.
I closed down the poll. Now I can share the result.
Okay, so we're going to share the results of the poll with you. So I don't know if you can see it on the screen. Okay. So so far,
the majority help teachers to get and make better materials. This is 41%.
So okay, yeah. So 41% are hoping that teachers should be able to get it. Yeah, thank you very much. So 42% see networks as a way of helping teachers to get better materials, and 32% are looking forward for better collaboration between teachers. And then a smaller number of people are interested in saving money and empowering teachers to shape their own development. Okay, thank you very much for that. Now, if it's possible, I'd like to bring in Pete Commerce at this point, but I have a feeling that's not possible at the second. Is that right?
No, in fact, it's not connected at the moment. We can go to the next one,
okay,
to Iglesia, and then we come back
to Ulieza.
Yes.
If you're ready, I'd like to give the word to you. So my colleague, Professor Ulieza Marjanovic, has been doing some work in Serbia. So I'm going to hand over to him now to explain to us the state of play in terms of platforms in Serbia and some of the options for Serbia. Ulieza.
Thank you, Julian. I'm so excited to have opportunity to present my research results on this webinar. I did some research in Serbia regarding the networking, and in the next 10 minutes I'm going to try to present the major results. So what I'm going to say is that I'm going to present the summary of my findings from the interviews and online searches that I did. Then I'm going to shortly present 3 identified virtual platforms for vocational teachers in Serbia, and then I'm going to end with a recommendation for potential pilot network in Serbia. So what I did in my research is pretty much from the online research identified around 13 platforms for VET teachers. Definitely there are more in Serbia, but these 13 are like a representative from the vocational teachers in Serbia. Around 500 VET teachers are using platforms on a regular basis, and pretty much I would say that 5,000 or more they are using it on occasion. Main technologies that I found for networks for VET teachers are Moodle, Facebook, and just a regular website. Main functionalities in those networks are e-learnings, different OERs, and news, just news as a function that you just mentioned in your slide, Julian. And focus differs from I don't know, like a unique mix of functionalities to I don't know different platforms. And for the next that I can say that I found that private platforms are self-funded, and platforms funded through projects are not sustainable. What I mean by this, that platforms that are collecting certain fees for their functionalities, they have a better chance for sustainability. And the platforms that are funded through projects, after the project is done, then pretty much they don't have any more funding to continue the operation. Sorry. A lot of platforms, they rely on a large share of voluntary work. What I mean through this, that all these platforms are using volunteers to work on these platforms, and their enthusiastic is what is needed for these platforms to be operational. VET communities are closed after funding is spent. I'm sorry. After funding is spent, and also commercial platforms that are charging fees for membership, for providing different training services, for providing, for example, OERs and etc. They're using different business models, and these platforms are pretty much sustainable. After my research and online research and 10 interviews that I conducted with different stakeholders that are using or somehow are connected with VET digital platforms, I shortlisted to 3 networks that I think that are most specified for the Serbia, and they are best representatives of digital networks in Serbia. The first one is National Repository for Agriculture Education, called NARA. The second one is Serbian Moodle Network, called MMS, and the Digital Treasury. So NARA is pretty much like a virtual community, and this is a repository of OERs and platform for online courses for all stakeholders in the area of agriculture, food production, and food processing. And the main members of this and users of this platform or this network are vet teachers and advisors of agriculture expert services. Advisors are persons who are providing consultancy services to agricultural producers. And this digital platform was one of the deliverables within the Tempus project. So they had a project and through the funding they established this network. So this is just a visual representation of this network, and this can be found on the web. The second one is Moodle Network of Serbia, and this is also a virtual community. This network has a focus on the free use of open source learning management system, which is called Moodle. This is an NGO organization, and gathers people who are interested in Moodle and how to share the best practice of how to use the Moodle. This is also the leading organization in Serbia that support national education development and all the initiatives in regards to e-learning. For example, they are in charge of localization and the translation of Moodle in Serbia. And also, this is their visual representation, and also can be found on the internet. The third one is a digital treasury, and I would say that this is a teacher's portal developed during the lifetime of another project, this time IPA project, since Serbia is a country that is accessing European Union. So and also this is a combination of OER and a virtual community for teachers. After the end of the project, the network is owned by the Ministry of Education, Science and Technological Development, and I'm afraid I'm going to say that this is not a live network, and it's only used on demand when it's needed for a specific project. And I also represented the picture of screenshot of their virtual network from the internet. So what I can conclude that all these 3 recommended networks are or will be dependent highly on voluntary work of their volunteers, and in all these 3 cases, this is a pretty small number of people that are helping them to achieve sustainability. All of them are using Moodle as the main technology. However, 2 of them are also using social networking for communication purposes. They all facing a lack of funding, and pretty much like after the initial donor funding is spent, they all are struggling with the funding and sustainability and how to operate in the future, and also lacking promotional activities or extensive face-to-face activities in order to attract a high number of members in these networks. And I'm gonna finish with this one. And if you have any questions, or maybe Julian have some questions for me from this chat option from the webinar.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Well, Jeza, thank you very much indeed for that really interesting presentation. I think it's really great just to get a snapshot of what is going on in another country and to see what the options are. In the real world, countries have to make choices about how they're going to move forward, and they can't do everything. So I think it's really helpful to identify some of the main options. Now we've got some interesting questions coming in. I noticed that someone is asking what the main motivation. Malcolm Larry, who's a colleague of ours and an expert in platforms, has asked what the main motivations of teachers are in using these platforms. Uliez, have you got anything further to say about that, about the motivations that users have on these different platforms, just very briefly?
Sure. So what I found from my research that the main motivation is that during the lifetime of the project, the owner of the project is going to try to build some kind of materials that is useful for the teachers. For example, this NARA digital network. And a lot of teachers in Serbia, vocational teachers, are struggling with the materials. As you mentioned, that this is the problem, I think, in the region. And they're all looking for extra materials that they can use for their teaching, in-class teaching. So there is one interesting information that I found from these interviews, that in Serbia, more than 800 courses are lacking the textbook for the teaching. So all these teachers are actually they're coming to the networks just to find some additional useful materials for their teaching. It's the major interest for them.
Thank you very much indeed. And I'd just like to point out that Erin McCullum has, from eTwinning, has just made the point that there's another opportunity here of accessing pan-European platforms, which clearly has the advantage of, in principle, helping teachers in all European countries, but also candidate countries which are eligible to participate in eTwinning, to access and share resources with teachers over the whole of Europe. And I think that's very exciting. I think it greatly increases the opportunities of resources, although clearly it needs some dialogue and discussion to make sure that those resources are relevant and intelligible. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to run another poll.
There was just a last question eventually that was left on the top from Besmina Mustafa.
So is that the question which is highlighted at the minute?
Yes, indeed. And then we can go to the poll, to the next one. How to create that teachers without involving work-based learning instructor, or another way of this question, how to involve instructors or the companies in education activities with teachers?
Well, I think one of the attractions of platforms, if I may, I'm going to try and answer this one. One of the attractions of platforms is they're very good at getting people from different institutions to work together. I mean, because of the fact that they're accessible to everyone, it is possible to bring together people who are working in schools, in universities, in business, and getting them to talk about problems and to share materials and to try and solve problems. And therefore, such platforms are quite commonly used in dual system countries like Germany, for example, in order to support apprentices who are learning in two different places, and where the teachers and the work-based supervisors want to discuss problems and share ideas. So I think that the virtual platforms can be a tool for that kind of cooperation to address these issues. Okay, thank you very much for those questions. I'm going to run the poll now, if I may.
Here we are.
So these are some options for Serbia, which Ulieza described to us. And I'd just be interested in what you think. I'm not saying that necessarily Serbia is going to do what you say, but it would just be interesting to get some feelings from your experience about which might be the best way forward for Serbia, a single large national platform, or a platform which supports teachers in a particular branch or profile with a narrow focus, or maybe something focusing just on IT teachers because they've got the best skills for networking, or some kind of mixture, or none of those. So really interesting to know what you think. Please will you signal what you think. It's interesting. We've got an excellent take-up here. I'm not going to say what the answer is, because I don't want to influence your voting.
No. So I would say that if we go with a central platform for all teachers, it's going to be hard to handle. So I would rather go with for the specialized networking. I don't know, maybe we could start with the IT platform so that we could educate and train the most wet teachers how to use like a different IT tools and to gain the IT skills needed for networking. I think that's the one that we lacking the most. So there is a huge digital divide in Serbia. So maybe we should start with some specialized platform.
Thank you very much indeed, Uljeza. Okay. Now the results of the poll, which I think I can just about see now, is quite interesting. That people, understandably, I think, have voted for a mixture. But I mean, the two most popular options, with about a fifth of the vote, are something which supports teachers in one profile or branch, or something focusing on IT teachers, and a large national platform is the least popular of the options. So that's interesting. Some confirmation there from our participants, Uljeza, of your point of view. Thank you very much indeed. It was really interesting to hear about Serbia. But what I want to do now is I want to bring in Professor Kommers from the University of Twente in the Netherlands, because he's got a very wide experience internationally of working in many continents on the development of e-learning and of platforms. And I've asked him here this afternoon to give us a bit of a bigger picture about what's going on internationally. Pete, I'm going to make you the presenter now. Please will you tell us something about platforms e-learning in an international dimension. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julian. I would like to ask, can you see my PowerPoint presentation at this moment?
No, you should activate your screen sharing. You are now the presenter, but actually it seems that your screen is not shared yet.
Oh, okay. Let me. Maybe it's this one. Huh? Let's see now.
Great. Thank you, Pete.
Please proceed.
Thank you very much. Well, yes, as Julian and the previous speaker, Iglesia, just showed, there is a wide spectrum of communication opportunities at this moment. And the issue for my part of the presentations is what kind of professions are needed for continuous engineering and training. So what are the competences that we can that we should demand from teachers in vocational education and training? The second issue is the three levels of communication and participation contributions. The first one is the learning resources, so to have all the material in a centralized place. The second is the option of having a news and updating mechanism via the new media, via the platforms. And the third option is the ultimate one, that when teachers are going to collaborate, to work together. So this is my introduction. Let me go to the next slide. I think we are all aware that there's a wide spectrum of communication options. I think we use a lot of email, also between the teachers. We have a high infrastructure. The infrastructure is available for, let's say, generic needs. We have still the telephone, the mobile telephone, especially the smartphone. And you can see we have also web applications that are commonly available, like we have, let's say, in buying and in sharing resources. We have the mechanisms to find common elements on the calendar, etc. So this is just to say, yes, we have so many options, and we know that the generic social media, like WhatsApp, you can see a screen up here. I think you will have all some experience. We see Facebook with all the facilities of building groups, making circles, first order, second order circles in terms of professional interest, and of course also private interest. So that can have more value than we do at this moment. We have also a more dedicated network like LinkedIn, and I think many of you will have some experience. Also, on top of that, We have some dedicated, let's say, corporate social networks like Jammer. It's not here on the screen, but it's important to mention, I think, that there is an option to go from the generic social media up to the more dedicated social media. I think in terms of collaboration, we can say, let's say, the most invasive form of collaboration, I think, is here in the middle. It's called communities of practice. It means that it's not only to make contact with colleagues, it's not only to know them better, but it's also to work with them together. And that's what we call communities of practice. And this idea is coined by Etienne Wenger from Canada, already for more than 15 years. And the idea is growing very much. This morning I got a message he will be in Germany and I think other places in Europe. And he is offering some places in his workshops as well. So I think the community of practice is more than working together. It's also more than the social aspects. It is to make loyalty and to have common goals for building a better future. And I think in that sense, it's a good candidate for learning communities to increase professional attitudes, professional skills among VET teachers. What in fact is a community of practice? I think first of all here in the brown area you can see it's a group of people that have a common interest. You can see they are among us. Sometimes we ourselves we admit that there are many colleagues who have exactly the same interest, how to increase effectiveness of learning, etc. We have also a group of people with a common goal of improving. So it's more a common mission to do something, to achieve something. And there's also, of course, a group of people who like to share experience. So if we think about the teacher communities, I think many of us are starting, the novices, and they would like to be, let's say, to be mentored by the more advanced, more experienced colleagues, and that can take place here in the lower circle. So again here, the group of people with a common goal of improving. I think that's the option that Julian was just bringing forward. How can we do the social, the operational, and let's say the sharing of resources? How can we combine that? We made a large inventory of existing networks and platforms all over Europe, and in our opinion, Julian's and mine, was that TESS is a very advanced network. It's a platform, a web-based platform to let teachers benefit from the sharing and from the collective understanding in this professional field. And you see here just one of the many menus where you can welcome people from the lounge, so newcomers. There's educational news, there's workplace dilemmas, so let's say sharing between us. We have a personal corner, we have a clinic, like the progressive career, etc. Now, you could ask, what are the more concrete actions that can take place in the communities of professional practice? Well, first of all, I think every professional faces the need for lifelong learning. It can be on-the-job learning, it can be more explicit moments of following courses, we call it formal training. You can see here on the top pentagon, the training is one explicit corner. We have the mentoring, helping each other to elicit each other and to promote and to foster and to encourage the colleagues to do something extra than we did before. So to try out new approaches. The mentoring, I think, is a very important element to make the community stronger. We have the accreditation. Once we have an improved level of competence, we would like to to have it expressed in a diploma, and a certificate. We have also the teacher research. So a group of teachers might find out, well, there is something new, like, for instance, we have 3D printing. Let's see what we can actually do with it. Is it only part of the ICT curriculum, or is it part of science, or maybe even part in medical training, or in any type of design, industrial design, for instance. So the teacher group might find each other and do an effective, very efficient research how to find the best practice. The cascade of knowledge, so to say, to stand on the shoulders of our experienced colleagues in the recent past. That's meant by the cascade of knowledge. It's building up the best practices so that our new colleagues, our novices, can build upon that. The main functions of a repository platform are accumulation and archiving of materials, upload and download materials, searching the materials, reviewing and rating, questions and answers, of course, open educational resources, the e-learning tools. If we talk nowadays, I think we have, of course, the Blackboard and the Moodle. Moodle is open source, which is very beneficial, but also we can learn a lot from the previous generations, like Open Learning Space and all the precursors, like Sakai, for instance. Analytics means that we help each other in becoming more precise. What do we see as indicators of best practice? The marketplace, we can even sell or get some royalties from the material that we as individual teachers made. And we have, of course, the commercialization, so we might have open publications of our work, of our learning material that we just made. An important example besides TESS is D-School. It's in Greece, where Greece has a lot of initiatives. The government, through a project, said, let's make one big repository, even they call it depository of learning objects. And this is an easygoing way to find all the commonly accepted learning materials, in this case in Greece. So I heard from personal witnesses that it's seen as a very effective way to find available material. At this site, it's not so much yet a community. It's more what we call a repository to find existing resources. I'm coming back now on TESS. And the question we asked, Julian and me, was why is TESS such a huge success in terms of number of participants? We are talking about several million of participants and many of thousand interactions every day between countries. And one of the reasons, I think, why it's so successful is that it's a very vivid, it's like a warm room where you enter and you can see, depending on the season of the year, what is going to happen. Like now in many Western countries we have the Carnival, so it's not very busy in the schools. Many schools are closed, especially in the south part of Holland. And you can see that teachers easily feel at home to see the best practice, and they feel like in a big warehouse, a supermarket, where you can just pick and mix, you get inspiration. And that's an element that is also important. Besides of the community, that there is a central organization that makes it well organized and well up to date. It's like just like what publishers do, and in this case we could see TESS even a kind of new publishing formula. So we have another example that was inspirative as well. It's called Swivet in Swiss, and here I'm looking to the clock, yes, here we see that it's not only the teaching community, the community of teachers, it's also the practical thing, the businesses, those who want our students, the fed students. So they are part in organizing the main agenda of Swivet. It's a very well known at this moment. It's a well renowned organization, a good example what we could take care of in our next steps to make learning platforms, teacher platforms. Well, okay, we have in SWIVET we have research and development, so you can see new projects coming on, very dynamic, also kind of brainstorm process between the teachers, even if they are in different places. So this is the final point to be discussed, I think, before I give back the microphone to Julian. I think we have the repository function in VET platforms to have all the ready material. We have the news and the actuality, and we have the community, how to work together. So I would like to give back the floor to Julian. Thanks for listening to you.
Pete, thank you very much indeed for taking us on a journey through different international platforms and helping us to make some sense, because it can be a bit overwhelming, the great variety of opportunities. So I try and understand that maybe we can classify them a little bit into platforms which mainly are a repository of materials, or platforms which are mainly focusing on news, or platforms which perhaps fundamentally are about communication. Although clearly some platforms try and do more than one thing. Perhaps we can immediately run a poll to try and get people's take on that, to try and see which they feel of these different sorts of platforms might be most relevant to them. So I'm inviting you to talk about which of these different sorts of platforms you think might be most relevant for your country. So I'd be really grateful if you could vote to let us know which sort of platform you think is most relevant for you. So that's great. Thank you very much for participating. We've got some good questions coming in. Thank you very much indeed. We've been asked by Vocational in Serbia whether these particular platforms are supported by respective governments. And I think the interesting thing is, the interesting answer to that is not all of them. Some platforms are massively supported by governments. Some platforms are not really supported by governments, and they're much more bottom-up activities or networks, which are supported by a group of teachers who've got a common interest. Perhaps they're teaching a common subject. Some platforms are supported much more by particular projects. And the platform or the network is really only serving people involved in the network. So there's some choices to be made about whether it's best to have a single platform pushed by a government or to have smaller platforms which are serving a more focused activity or more focused audience. Thank you very much for your voting. I think we probably got to a conclusion of that. I'm just looking to see what the results are. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting there that the majority of you, 45% of you, feel that your country needs most a platform to help teachers to communicate and collaborate. And then very closely behind that is the idea of a repository. But I am impressed that so many of you value the idea of communication and collaboration, because sometimes people think only in terms of exchanging materials, and they don't think so much of teachers as being creative and teachers directly sharing practice. And therefore I'm impressed that the largest single percentage of you are favouring that kind of communication, which I think possibly is the future for teaching, more with emphasis upon cooperation and generating materials together. So thank you very much for that. I'm keen to move forward now because we're pushing a little bit with time, and I don't want to strain people's patience this afternoon. So I'm going to introduce my colleague from Albania, Gerda Sula. Dr. Sula is working at the University of Tirana. She's a specialist in pedagogy, and she's done some exploration of what's going on in terms of web-based networks in Albania, and also to explore some of the options for Albania. Gerda, can I make you presenter now?
She's already presenter, so Yeah, if you can share your screen, thank you.
Yes. Okay, hi everybody. Thank you for having me. It's quite a privilege actually to be able to participate as a presenter. It's my first time, so for me being a presenter, I've participated in other webinars. So during this research that was parallelly conducted in the three countries, Serbia, Turkey, and Albania, there were several issues that came up that were brought to attention by the presentation of Ugeza, and also they were wrapped up very nicely by Pete's presentation. So the issues are in three, it's a three tiers issue really. It's a personal issue for the need for professional development. It is a personal demand and drive. There are professional issues that encourage people to be involved in such a project, and also institutional issues. And there are benefits in all three levels, that there are also some hindrances. Language, for example, is a major issue for the Albanian teachers, being not very articulated in English. And most of the materials or the networks are in English, and I was not able to identify virtual network for professional development for teachers of VET in Albania. So that is an issue, and that brings the other issue of importance in the personal level, which is IT literacy. Teachers are not very comfortable and familiar with using platforms. Regarding professional challenges, teachers are very busy. They have long working hours, big number of students, and the danger of burnout is very strong. So I will focus on this presentation. I will only focus on what are the possible strategies that were collected by this research activity. It's in the three levels. It was mentioned in Ugleza's presentation pretty much in the same line, and I will go through all three of them. The bottom-up approach is pretty much what the name says. It's a number of enthusiastic and willing to take over teachers that could develop this professional network. This network could be focused on a specific profile or on clustering groups of schools. The reason why this might work is that it can have both issues that were found as important by your poll, both communication, blogging, chatting, or whatnot, and also accumulating teaching and learning materials later on. It will not start right away with the accumulation, because that needs some assurance that there will not be any abuse on the documents produced. There are several advantages to that. It's very democratic, peer-to-peer, and there is no pressure from the hierarchy. Teachers will be able to discuss challenges with their peers who have the same issues, so they won't feel as much judged. It will be owned by teachers, so that is a very strong benefit, and it will respond to the needs of the real participants. It will not be proposed by experts, outside experts. And there are also very important disadvantages that need to be kept in mind, such as sustainability. How much will this enthusiasm last? Can a network such as this be built on enthusiasm alone? How will teachers be willing to share materials, or will they not, because they won't want to be judged by other teachers? And is it possible to identify teachers who are able to do such a project, to undertake such an important initiative? And these are disadvantages that need to be kept in mind. Second model identified is the continuous professional development provider approach. These organizations already exist. They are either public or private institutions who already offer professional development, but these professional development activities are mostly face-to-face or solely face-to-face, and that can be like an added wing to their already existing professional development activities for teachers. What is the advantages is that many of the resources already exist. They already have a network, they already have human resources to build a platform, they already have resources and materials that can be shared. There can be a very important relationship between face-to-face activities. Teachers very often feel left alone once they attend a face-to-face activity and they go to their classroom. It's not easy to maintain the same level of enthusiasm as they are in their classroom when they find a first challenge. If they are encouraged to reflect upon this and grow, it can be very beneficial. There are also, we need to keep in mind the financial aspects. Because professional development is demanded by law, these organizations can also benefit from funds existing in the budget in the state budget, or apply for funds elsewhere from donors, international or national donors. There are disadvantages, of course, such as this issue of compulsory training and having to continue to participate in some added activities. Sometimes teachers participate in compulsory training also because of institutional demands. They just want to make sure they are in line with the law, and once they're done with that, that's just it. And designing such a platform, it demands additional work, so the providers need to think about that prior to being embarked in such a project. The third approach is the national approach, which can be included in the NAVET-Q, which is the national organization, the public organization, the sole national public organization responsible for the development of professional development of vet materials, professional development of the teachers, develop the curricula and other instructions. So they have already a platform in which teachers go to download, only to download materials, instructions, regulations, laws, and whatnot. Such a platform is very well respected, being the only one which shares this kind of information with the teachers. And adding some more content and functionality would add value to their website. There is already an audience, the existing actual users, and it can be expanded by social networks who would support the goals of NAVET-Q. There are several important disadvantages to be kept in mind. This organization is, as I already mentioned, a public institution responsible for NAVET-Q, and they might be intimidated by such a high status to participate as benefactors, not only to receive materials but also to share documents with them. The national status might be confusing to teachers because they might think that this is compulsory documents being shared with them rather than just guidance. And very important, the staff is it's a small number of staff, very overworked, very busy, and adding such an important aspect to their job would demand extra resources, human, financial, and also infrastructures. Three strategies need to, however, keep in mind that there are two main general challenges to any of the strategies selected. How to make sure that teachers are motivated continuously to be actively involved, not only to share materials, but also to share ideas and discussions, and also maintaining an acceptable workload and maintaining a financial load that can be acceptable for the donor, whoever the donor might be, and in continuation, making sure that the project does not end with the end of the funds. So yeah, that's what I wanted to share and talk with you about.
Thank you very much indeed, Gerda. I think that's very interesting, because what struck me listening to you is that the options that you give, although they obviously have been generated when thinking about Albania, they have relevance to most countries, I would say, so that either you have a sort of top-down national approach to building a website, or trying to drive it through teacher training, and the platform is connected to teacher training, or thirdly, you have some kind of bottom-up strategy. And I think in most countries, these represent possible strategies. So I think it's helpful for us to see how they work in one country, but also beyond that. I've got a particular question from my colleague, Evelyn Viertel, here at ETF, and she asks, have you got any ideas how a virtual platform could be integrated within professional development for vocational teachers for pedagogy in Albania? Have you got any particular thoughts about that, Gerda?
You will have to repeat the end of the sentence. How to integrate it to where?
So in Albania, I understand that there's some particular training going on in pedagogy for vocational teachers. Mm-hmm. So the question for my colleague Evelyn is, how could a platform, how could a virtual web-based platform be connected to such training? How could there be a blending of face-to-face and web-based training for teachers, for vocational teachers in Albania?
Thank you so much to Evelyn for the question. This training it refers to a compulsory training that all the teachers who are not really teachers, who are all the professionals who teach in the vet schools, but who have not received the pedagogical education formation, initial formation, are required to take. It's not very possible to add this kind of element now that the training is on the route and the teachers are active. But it can be a great opportunity to try out and develop some platforms. So using the most used platform is the social media is Facebook, to develop a Facebook group for these teachers so that they are involved during the week that they are working with their students. This training happens every weekend, and it's 24 training days, so it's long and it's very it's very demanding for the teachers in terms of time and human resources, etc. And having this kind of support, it could be, first of all, it could be an interesting test to see whether this kind of forms do work. And I believe teachers would be more supported during their new ways of teaching while they are involved in this kind of compulsory training.
Gerda, thank you very much indeed. And I think you make an important point that providing a web-based platform for teachers doesn't necessarily mean constructing an expensive and dedicated site which has to be done right at the beginning. It could mean using a social media tool such as Facebook or WhatsApp, and just linking that with some other activity to mobilize teachers to get more communication, more exchange, more sharing of practice, more follow-up of what happens from an existing training provision. And that can be relatively low cost, it can be quite flexible, it can be easy to bolt on later, it can be easy to do for those teachers who are enthusiastic. So we don't need to have something which is completely comprehensive, systematic and planned for 5 years. We can be a little bit more smarter and flexible and livelier on our feet. I hope. Okay, so we're going to now move on to a poll just to find out what people made of that last presentation and what they think the relevance is for Albania, which way they think Albania should go. So I'm going to ask my colleague to launch the poll. There it is. So I'd be really grateful, please, if you could check whichever option you think is best for Albania, just to give us a bit of a feedback about which way you think Albania should go. So please, if you could, give us some feedback. That's really great. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much for giving us your responses there. Yeah, I can see they're coming in. I mean, clearly there are attractions to these different options. Understandably, I can see quite a lot of people are looking for a mixture of these options. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to close the poll there and share it. So as you can see, the majority, 50% or half of you, favour a mixture of these options, and then a national platform is favoured by around 30%, and then at around 17% we've got an interest in bottom-up networks and also ones provided by providers. And I don't think that necessarily a mixture is a bad thing. I think that it may make it more complicated, it may make it more messy, but I think that the thing about platforms is that you've got to use the energy, you've got to use the desire for communication that people have, and I think if platforms start off in different places with different interests and different purposes and different people, it may end up over time that they will join together, and you can construct ultimately a network of networks to join different networks together. So networks are a little bit different from other things in education planning, and I think sometimes a more messy and more complex approach may be the right one. And certainly I think that's what you know, the participants of this webinar seem to be thinking now. Now, I'd like to move on now. Our final country that we want to look at is Turkey. And in the case of Turkey, I'm going to present myself about Turkey. So if I've got your attention, please. Unfortunately, my Turkish colleague is not here this afternoon to make this presentation, but I'm going to just give you a little bit of an idea of what's going on in Turkey, so that you can follow. We can sort of complete the full story. So.
Just a second, you are now back as a presenter.
Well, I beg your pardon, I've just been given the presentation there. So, I'll just be with you 1 second. Okay, I do beg your pardon there. Okay, I beg your pardon about that. We were just getting a little bit of confusion about that. So, the situation in Turkey is that there's a lot of small networks, there's a lot of small activity of communication of small groups of teachers, maybe within their own school or informal networks on Facebook or on WhatsApp. But there's also at national level a very large platform which is not limited to vocational education. It is actually for all teachers and for all students. Indeed, it's more focused at students than it is focused at teachers. And it consists of a big investment in e-learning tools, and there's a large amount which has already been designed and included, and they're putting a lot more on the system. And this Education Knowledge Network, which is known as EBA, does have kind of wide knowledge within the system. Most subjects have got some material on them. It's well supported technically. Content is updated. And one of the good things about it is that it includes publicly created content, but there's a system to get NGOs and the private sector to contribute too. So in that way, it uses its size to attract more contributions. And there's also an opportunity for teachers and students to upload their own material, which is subject to quality assurance, and which can then be used by other teachers and students. The weaknesses of EBA is that it is rather over-centralized, and there isn't an enormous number of teachers and students who contribute. Most of the content is commissioned by the centre and installed by the centre, and understandably teachers and students feel that that's the way it works, and they don't really expect to upload a lot of their own material because they see it as a system which is populated by the ministry. It doesn't have a special focus on vocational education, and I think everyone agrees that the amount of vocational education content is relatively small, and it doesn't support teachers and students that much to produce their own content, although there are some teachers who are seconded from teaching who are given time to produce content in specialist areas. Sustainability depends upon a particular project, a FATI project, which is funding this development, and the other concern, I suppose, is that this website is not connected particularly to the professional development of vocational teachers. There are activities to support professional development of teachers, but they're quite separate from this platform. So there's no linkage, there's no blending of face-to-face learning and the platform. Another large platform which exists in Turkey is eCampus. eCampus is a project-driven platform which is strongly supported by a private bank. What's quite exciting about it, I think, is that there is a blending between online training and face-to-face training. And there's a professional team which defines and develops instructional materials. So there's quite high quality of design which goes into the creation of these materials. There's there's sustainable and continuous monitoring and evaluation, and the focus of this platform is general pedagogical skills. So again, it doesn't really address vocational skills, but it has got a clear focus, and these pedagogical skills are obviously relevant for vocational teachers, and there is some high quality content provided. I guess that the downside of this is this lack of focus on vocational teachers, and the fact that, broadly speaking, most of the content is provided by the project, and teachers are not really taking up the facility to exchange content with one another, although there is quite a high level of blogging of teachers sharing news with one another, which I think is a very positive development. And then, just to mention to you, an example of a very different sort of bottom-up platform in Turkey is a particular website which has been developed by vet teachers, run by one particular vet teacher, which runs on a very, very limited budget. It runs only on sort of voluntary contributions by teachers, but it is one of the most popular websites for teachers in Turkey. And I think it's an indication that there is a desire and an appetite for vet teachers to share resources, given that this website, which is not funded at all, is in fact extremely popular and which is trusted and which is a basis for cooperation. Unfortunately, there's no technical or pedagogical support, there's no login data kept, and it's run on a voluntary basis. So I suppose the message that comes out of this is that there is this enthusiasm and interest in getting involved, and then on top of that there are these project and national websites which are providing quite a lot of content, but not all that much as yet for vocational teachers. And then a few recommendations that maybe the existing ministerial platforms could have more content and services for vocational teachers. There are some areas where possibly platforms could address all teachers where there's an overlap. So for example, if you take the areas of language learning and STEM, there could be common support for teachers whether they're vocational or whether they're universal. It doesn't really matter because both have got an interest in these areas. That smaller teacher project networks such as one I mentioned could be supported. That there could possibly be some kind of network at provincial level or within a particular branch. And finally, that some kind of larger meta-network might be set up within which different platforms could be identified. So that from a single portal, teachers could identify all of the different sort of portals and networks which are offered by different sorts of groups and projects and national groups within Turkey as a way of sharing and making these different options more accessible. So thank you very much. I'd be interested to know if there are any questions about that. Perhaps we could take the opportunity of running a short poll on the Turkish situation there, which my colleague has just done. So I'd be interested to know which of those options you think is a way forward for Turkey. And if you voted already, I'd also be interested if you've got any further questions, because we've just got time for a few more questions before we wind up the webinar. Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. Please do vote so that we can see what you think. As I say, I know that necessarily people in Turkey are going to act on what we say, but it's interesting nevertheless sometimes to try out options on other people, and sometimes it's wise to hear what other people think outside of a country to try and get their opinion. Thank you very much indeed. We'll close the poll and share it if we can.
Here we are.
Here we are. So, as I see it, the most popular single option, nearly 40% of respondents favour blended learning. In other words, they're looking for a way of combining face-to-face training with platforms. And I think that's interesting, and I think that that's an important bit of learning for all of us from Turkey, because Turkey does have experience of platforms, some of which do not include face-to-face learning. And I think Turkey has learned that that can be less effective than building in face-to-face training as well. And I think the second most option, with a quarter of the vote, is for more vocational content to be included into the national platform, using the status and the technical capability of the national system, but building in more vocational content to that. Thank you very much indeed. I noticed also that there's some interest for small teacher-owned networks and also for social media networks and also for distant learning. But once again, I mean, we may be looking at a kind of a mixed, a sort of mixed solution, a sort of mixed economy solution, if that's possible. Thank you very much indeed. I'm sorry that you had to put up with me presenting that rather than my colleague from Turkey. We've got a couple of questions I'd like to pick up on, and maybe I'm going to charge one of my panelists to answer one of these questions. I mean, Iris Julinovic, I beg your pardon, Iris, I've mispronounced your name, but she asks a very interesting question. She said, how do we motivate teachers to participate? It's a big ask of teachers to ask them to upload materials, and particularly if they're good materials. Why on earth should teachers do that? Perhaps I could ask Pete, what's the motivation for teachers? What do teachers gain from uploading materials?
I think there is a parallel between what we see now, face-to-face teaching, and giving web lectures. We see now in the Netherlands that maybe around 40 or 60 regular teachers in secondary schools, they start to record their lectures and broadcast it to any of their students or even students from different schools. So we see that the ambitions in the group of teachers is evolving to become externally visible experts and didactic experts. So I think there is an element growing, maybe based on culture, maybe based on the new media, that provokes this kind of trend. So I would call it the incentive of being visible and being recognized globally.
Thank you, Pete. That's very interesting and very helpful. I think it's interesting to point out that these networks may create a platform for teachers who want to distinguish themselves, want to get themselves recognized both within and beyond their profession, because perhaps they feel that professionally it may help them. It may help them in their careers, or it may help them beyond their careers. And I think that that's something new which networks can offer. Now, we've been just joined by Professor Soner Yildirim, our national expert from Turkey. So perhaps I can ask him the same question. Soner, you'll be pleased to hear that I gave your presentation for you, so I'm not going to ask you to do it now. But we've had an interesting question about the motivation of teachers, about how you motivate teachers to upload materials and to share their practice. I don't know, have you got any thoughts about that?
Okay, let me put it my experience, because I've been training teachers for the last 19 years in Turkey, and my major is computer teachers. I am training computer teachers, and I also work with those in-service teachers a lot. I also provide in-service training to teachers. But teachers are after the incentives to share any type of materials, and first of them is the recognition, because they want to be recognized and appreciated by their principals, by the Ministry of National Education and the Board of Education. But since the numbers in Turkey is too high, huge in terms of like the number of the students, because we have around like 17 million students in the country, 1 million teachers, and when you say you are going to conduct an in-service training, it refers to 1 million teachers. That's the bottom line. And we have almost like 200,000 teachers in vocational and technical education. Now you have to motivate those, and you have to have them feel like they want to share their materials online with other colleagues. But I always appreciate those type of teachers who are self-motivated to develop those materials and share those materials with their colleagues. So when you look at what causes self-motivation, most of them are eager to learn a lot. They are open to innovation, and they don't want to be like what they are after 20 years while they are teaching. But there is a huge number of teachers, they don't care about how they look like for their students or for the parents or for the principals, because there is always a shortage in teachers' numbers in Turkey. They are in kind of like, you cannot give up on those teachers, because within the system, we still have shortage of like, I don't know the exact number, but it's around like 50,000 teachers is still needed in the system. So intensive, again, are the keywords. And those intensives should be clear by the Ministry of National Education. That's the bottom line. Mm-hmm. The ministry should take the central role in creating such incentives. It might be an extra pay for teachers, maybe a day off from their jobs, because most of them are teaching like 25 hours to 30 hours a week. So they have a very high teaching schedule. So they need incentives. This is my point, I guess.
Okay. Thank you very much, Soner. I think that, one important point to be made here is that it's one of these issues where if you only think of what individuals have to contribute, it seems impossible. Why should I do extra without being paid?
Exactly.
On the other hand, if you can establish a culture where people are willing to do that, then each teacher is going to find their job a lot easier and a lot more productive. Because instead of having to create all my materials myself and plan my lessons and be creative and decide how to address a new curriculum, I can draw upon the skills and the ideas of many of my colleagues. And also, I can collaborate with them. I can work with them to make those materials. And I don't know about you, but I find working with other people and sharing ideas and swapping ideas and being creative a lot more motivating, a lot more interesting than doing it by myself. So I think one of the motivating elements of networking is the social dimension. The fact that you come to know people online, you work with them, and you do it for them. So you're not just doing it for a whole bunch of anonymous people, you're doing it for a known group of teachers with whom you're collaborating. And if we want networks to work, we have to have that kind of connection and trust. It's no good thinking I'm doing it for the whole of Turkey. I have to have particular people that I know about who are going to evaluate what I do and feedback, because that's what's going to motivate me. We've had another interesting question which points out that broadcasting classes could work against good interaction with students, and that the notion of kind of putting your classes directly into the network could work against the quality of face-to-face interaction. And I guess that Pete wasn't suggesting that every class should be broadcast. I don't think he was imagining that that would be a good way forward. But I guess that there is an interesting question here, isn't there, about how we combine face-to-face work and face-to-face collaboration with online collaboration. Because in a way what we're saying is we want to do both of these things, and we want to learn how to combine them in a smart way. I wonder, Liesa, if I can bring you in here, because you've been quiet for a bit. What are your thoughts about blending, about the best ways of blending face-to-face and online learning and teaching?
I think that is definitely a winning strategy, since you have to involve your audience, and you don't have much time to have it all the face-to-face activities. So you have to think about it to spread your activities, do the flipped classroom strategy or similar things that, and then you have to do the follow-up things and reinforce the information and maybe sharing of the knowledge after you finish with your face-to-face activities. And definitely these platforms are giving you opportunities to do this and to implement this, such a strategy. So definitely blended learning or a blended approach is the most dominant. And I can see that in Serbia, all these platforms are using this approach. But another point that I think is a difficult thing is that how to motivate, as Soner and you mentioned, and Piet and Gerda also, all the platforms are having the same problem, how to motivate people to use the platform after such activities. I mean, you're reinforcing and engaging your audience on this webinar by doing some certain pools and asking different questions. But sometimes, if the person is doing for free the maintenance or moderation of the network of such a platform, that usually they don't have much time or motivation or enthusiasm on the long run to keep the high pace, high engagement of the members of the digital platform. So I think the mixture of everything that we heard today is the winning strategy.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Now, I'm afraid that we're almost at the end of our webinar now. I'm sorry to bring things to a close, but I am aware of time, and I'm quite anxious not to overshoot on time. So I'm going to, there's just a couple of points I wanted to bring in here before we wind up, and yeah, so you'll just bear with me while I sort things out here a little bit. So in particular, I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that ETF has produced some guidance on good practice in networks, and we have produced a draft of this guidance which is available on our platform. So you can, this is available as a handout which you can download from the webinar, but we will also send it out to you in a mail shot after this meeting. But there is accessible here some draft material which we very much hope you'd have a look at, and if you've got any comments or improvements or suggestions, we would welcome those. We've got a further publication to follow which will explore how to move forward with networks, how to develop them. We have a platform which is there for sharing, where we'd like people to comment, to go online, and we've developed a forum where you can have any further comments about this discussion if you want to, so please go to that platform if you'd like to. You can continue the conversation in the forum which I've listed there, or by emailing me or in other ways. My colleague has got some other news that he wanted to mention to you more broadly about digital and online learning. So I'm just going to pass the presentation to him so he can make that comment, and then I'll invite my boss, Javier, to sum up.
Yeah, thank you very much. I would like just to mention that this is a first webinar related to the use of technologies to improve access and provision to vocational education and training. So a very short announcement of an upcoming webinar that is will come soon, which will focus on digital skills and in the so-called 21st century skills. Indeed, what we want to discuss is what do we mean for digital skills and competence. And we will bring with us the latest development within the European Union in this respect to support a more digital online practices in our schools. We will focus mainly, therefore, on vocational education and training in EU candidate countries. So the webinar will be a new opportunity to look at a bit more specifically on digital skills for young people, the new generation, the new citizens, and as well for teachers to take benefit also of these kind of options to get connected, to develop new resources, and to stay connected with the other colleagues and share good practices. That's all. Thank you, Julian.
Alessandro, thank you very much indeed. I'm just going to give the microphone to my colleague Javier to close down the webinar. Javier.
No worries.
We cannot hear you.
Okay. Julian, we are not able to hear. We are missing the whole conversation, guys.
We have to let them know.
Yeah. Would anybody write down that we are not able to hear them?
Hello, Julian. There is no sound from your side at this moment.
Yep. We haven't heard of a word.
Hello,
At the end, well, maybe we used up our slot, maybe. It's already 3:34 and maybe we used up our slot.